Any other questions yet, Jan? Maybe I'll remember what I was thinking about.
Question is from Carrie. Have you ever had a close call with any animals that might have scared you, like when the landy broke down by the hyena den at night?
Cool. Carrie? No, don't walk like that, Christy. Christy just sneaking underneath the car. James' girlfriend is visiting with us. She went to fetch computers. Carrie, you're asking about if I've ever had close encounters. I must admit, maybe my memory is a bit foggy. I don't remember specifically the time the landy broke down with hyenas, mainly because the landy has broken down quite a few times with us. But no, I mean, it's always a difficult question for me to answer. It's one of those questions that in my guiding career as well, you often have questions about dangerous encounters, and you often have questions about what's your favorite animal. And that's, of course, a very objective thing, or subjective thing, really, depending on which side you're looking at it from. Okay, to answer your question, I've had a few close things. I mean, if you spend enough time out here, you sometimes do get close to things. But, that can vary from a couple of times when you get very close to a snake, which is potentially more dangerous, I guess, than it would be to get very close to an elephant. Personally, I've never had something where I'd say it was very close and I felt like I was going to die. And it's not because I'm arrogant about it, or it's not because I'm overconfident. I've got a lot of respect for animals, which is a very important thing. But through time, you get to become very comfortable with it. The same as maybe some of you live in big cities and you have to walk around quite a lot. So you're quite used to crossing the road just quickly if you need to through traffic. And the car might not miss you by that much, but you know what you're doing and you've got a healthy respect for the car because you know if it hits you, it's going to be a problem. But you manage to cross it anyway because it's something you're used to. The same would go for being out here. If you live out here all the time, you keep that healthy respect for your environment, or you should. If you don't, then you should reevaluate why you're out here. And through that, you get to know animals better, you get to know their behavior better, and because of that, you can sometimes get very close. So there's been cases that might look dangerous, or if you were to film it, it might look like a very close encounter, but it's never in any way that I felt this animal now wants to kill me. But at the same time, it does come along. A lion charging at you, or running at you on foot, or black rhino once running after me very close. It is obviously a very, very exhilarating experience. But it's not something I would say was a close encounter, because I've walked away from everything. So as long as you walk away from it and you're fine, and more importantly, or as importantly, the animal is fine, then it's just a good close encounter. So I hope that answered that. And I'm not quite used to having a talk show, talking with you guys and having questions asked, but it's quite nice. Thank you for sending questions through. I'm hoping there might be another one. Jan, anything new yet?
Peter, from Sandy, how long is a lion's gestation, and how often do they breed?
Sandy, thank you for that question. It's sort of a more sort of theoretical question about lion breeding. And this is, I presume it's the same Sandy. Jan, just confirm, is it Sandy from Baltimore?
No, that's negative.
Okay. Just Sandy from Baltimore, maybe it's the same one. Just hearing that you're not that well, we hope you get better soon. That came through in one of the other emails earlier. But as the question for the lion's breeding cycle, how often they breed and how long the gestation is, the gestation is 3.5 months, plus or minus. I forgot the exact days. It's about 110 days or something like that. 3.5 months. So it's quite a quick or short gestation, which is something you find often with large predators, mainly because they're big. They're lions. They, in many people's minds, the king of the jungle, and they can afford to have their cubs quite small because they can protect them to a large extent, obviously within reason. Other lions can come in and kill them, or other predators could find the cubs. But typically speaking, that female can take a relatively short period of time and maybe produce 4 cubs at quite a small size, and then give them more time and more care over a few weeks after birth until they get stronger. So they're born quite weak. They're born what's called artificial. So they're born a bit blind and not that strong. In the first few days and first few weeks after birth, the mother just hides them. She doesn't keep them with the pride. She keeps them away so that other animals can't find them that easily. She goes and hunts by herself quite often, or with the pride, and comes back and feeds them until they get bigger and stronger, and then she takes them and they join the pride and they get to know all the different members, and they obviously know the story from there on. They grow along with the pride. So that's the first part of the question. It's quite a short gestation because they can afford to look after the cubs afterwards. Something like an impala can't go and have a little lamb that can't run around for the first few weeks because it's an impala. It's not going to go to the lion and say, listen, you're not touching my lamb. It's going to have more energy and time spent. So an impala, which is much smaller, will take about 6.5 months gestation, and they then have precocial lambs or precocial babies, which means pre-developed. So that baby is born, and within minutes it's up and running, and it can feed and it can see and can do everything that it needs to. but that impala can only have one youngster at a time. So that's the trade-off. As for the breeding cycles, Sandy, that depends obviously on quite a lot of things. But let's say in a typical ideal world, where nothing goes wrong, there's no droughts, there's no shortage of food, there's no other lions that come in and attack them, or there's no hyenas that come and kill one of the cubs. In an ideal situation, they will have cubs roughly every 2 years, 2.5 years, basically because they have the cubs. So from conceiving, 3.5 months later, the little cubs are born, and it takes about 18 months to 24 months for those cubs to get big enough that they're self-sufficient. So what happens with your female cubs, they will often stay in the pride. With your male cubs, if they're lucky enough to have brothers or cousins, they form coalitions, and at about 2 years of age, they get pushed out by the bigger males and they become nomads, and they go live as nomads for, again, depends on the area and how big they are, but let's say typically 4 to 5 years, until they're about 5 years to 7 years old, when they get big and strong, and then they'll go back, not necessarily back to the original area, but to another area, and they'll go challenge other males, try and kick other males out to take over a pride. Exactly what is happening at the moment. The Mapocho males 2 or 3 years ago, even though there were 5 of them, wouldn't have been big enough and mature enough to start challenging. But they stuck together, they stayed in a coalition, and then they came in and at the moment they look like they're going to take maybe even 2 different prides. So that's the cycle that goes with males. So coming back to the breeding cycle, so let's say 2 to 2.5 years, a female could have cubs all the time. If it's in very harsh conditions, maybe like let's say in the Namibian desert, or maybe in a place where it's food is very scarce or there's regular droughts, a lot of cubs can die. Lion cubs, typically speaking, look at about a 50% mortality rate. So it means that typical female with 4 cubs might sometimes only raise 1 or 2 of those cubs successfully, but it can also mean that she might raise all 4 successfully, but the next time along, within 6 months or a year after birth, she could lose all those cubs. Something that is, now I don't want to be a doomsayer, but it's sort of on the horizon for the Kuruma cubs at the moment. So in that case, these females, some of them have got cubs that are only 3 months old at the moment, so they would have conceived 6 months ago, and if those cubs get killed by the males, I'll explain a little bit more about that just now, because I know it's a very, very touchy subject, infanticide. If those cubs get killed, the female will go into estrus, sometimes even a false estrus, almost just to see if those males are going to stick around, and then after that into a true estrus, conceive again. So it means that these new males, if they do take over the pride successfully, then they could have their own offspring, their own genetic offspring, within about 4 months after taking over an area, because they are in turn going to need another 18 months after that, or another 2 years after that, to successfully raise those cubs. So that's why these males can't come in and decide, oh well, we're going to spend the next year and a half looking after other males' cubs, and then we're only going to mate, and then we're going to need more time to have our own cubs. So they're going to need 3 or 4 years just to have their own offspring then. Obviously they can't afford that time, because they probably won't be around for that much. So it's beneficiary for them to kill the offspring, get those females back into estrus, and have their own genetic offspring from that, as harsh as it might sound. Keep in mind, and this is what I was thinking about earlier today actually, that not that long ago in human history, infanticide was not all that uncommon. Even in Western history, in Europe, in African history, in various in Eastern history, the little bit I know about all the different parts of the world, it's something that was actually quite prevalent throughout a lot of human history, basically because various other reasons, often with your people that were at the top of leading countries and so on, didn't want to have other parties that could threaten your position. But it's not something that was uncommon with us quite recently, after we'd invented things like the fire and the wheel and machinery and language and culture and music. And we're still killing other humans as well in infanticide, never mind all the rest of it. So not to go on about that too much, but as much as people can go very upset about it. I was in Cape Town on my leave now, and I spoke to a few of my friends about the lions and the prides takeover, and many of them reacted, oh, but can't you take the cubs out, or can't you do something with the males and so on? And of course we could, but that would miss the point, and it's also not quite as harsh as we think, because it's something that we only in our very recent history used to do ourselves.